Following video is part of my practical TypeScript course. And if you wish to enroll in the full course, please navigate to codingaddict.io. Again, the URL is codingaddict.io, or you can utilize the link provided in the description. And up next, let's quickly cover class syntax in TypeScript. Now, if you don't use classes in your project, feel free to skip this section altogether, since most likely you'll see very little benefit. And first, let's start with a recap that classes in JavaScript serve as blueprints for creating objects. And they also have this special method called constructor, which is automatically called when we create a new class instance with the new keyword. And this keyword inside of the constructor refers to the object being created. So in this case, I have a class. Notice we need to use the keyword of class. Then the name is book. Now the convention is to go with uppercase, but technically you don't have to. And it has a constructor. It's a typical method. Basically, we can pass here params, and in this case, I have title and the author. So every time I'm going to go with new book and pass in the values, they will be set inside of this object, inside of this class instance. And in order to set those properties, I need to go with this dot, then the name of the property, in this case title, and I just set it equal to a value which is being passed in. So in this case, it's deep work, and then the author name. Now, since we're working in TypeScript, notice how we have a few red squiggly lines. How do we fix them? For starters, we need to set up the annotations over here in the constructor. So what is going to be the type of the title and author? And here, let's just go with string and string. And of course, we can use the Boolean, we can use the number, pretty much everything that we have learned up to this point. But here's the kicker. I still have the red squigglies inside of the constructor. And you'd think, okay, we can go over here and say that this is going to be a string and number or Boolean. But when it comes to classes and TypeScript, we actually need to go inside of the class and explicitly set the type for the properties we're setting inside of the constructor. So in this case, since I have two of them, I have title and author. Yes, I need to go above my constructor and essentially set this one equal to a string. And the same is going to go for author. So I set both of them up, and then notice now I don't have the red squigglies, and I'm able to create those instances. Again, result is going to be exactly the same. I will still have my instance, in this case, deep work, with the title and author properties. The difference, now TypeScript is happy as well. So I'll be able to build my project. Just like in normal JavaScript, we can also set instance properties, or they're also referred to as default properties. And essentially the idea is that we set this property inside of the class instead of the constructor, and then they get automatically added to all the instances we create. Now, how's that going to look like? Well, imagine we have this checked out property, and it's a Boolean, and initially it's always going to be false. So yes, definitely we can go here with this dot checked out. And again, notice we're not passing anything in a constructor. It's going to be set by default, and I'm going to go with false. So now I can navigate over here and say checked out and set it equal to Boolean, correct? So this is going to work. But since I'm not passing this as a parameter, we might as well set this one up as a default property. So I can just remove this line of code, and where I have the checked out, yes, I can still keep it as Boolean and set it equal to false, but we can also rely on the fact that TypeScript is going to infer this value. So this is up to you. You can go like this, or you can set up the checked out like so, equal to false, for example, or true, and then TypeScript will immediately infer the type. Now again, just like other times when TypeScript infers the type, just be mindful of potential pitfalls you might face. And if, let's say, we're going to go with deep work and checked out, we should see the value in the console. So at the moment it's false. And let's say if we decide to set it equal to true, that's also an option. So let's go with deep work, checked out, and let's set it equal to true. Now, since it's a Boolean, we can definitely do so. Now it's equal to true. But if I'm gonna change it to hello world, of course, this is not going to work. TypeScript is going to complain because it is a Boolean. So this is how we can set up default properties in classes in TypeScript. When we work with classes in TypeScript, we also have this read-only modifier, which does exactly what the name suggests. Essentially, if we add this read-only modifier to any of the properties, we won't be able to modify them. For example, if I'm going to go to my title, add read-only, yes, I can still read the value. For example, I can go with deep work and title. And for some reason, I keep forgetting to set up my logs. So we can still nicely access the value. The problem is going to be if we try to change it. So if we go here with deep work title and set it equal to something else. So this is not going to fly, because now we have this read-only modifier added to the title property. Also in TypeScript, we have private and public modifiers, which control whether we can access the property or the method from the outside. Now, as a side note, by default, everything is public. Therefore, if we go with deep work and type dot, notice we have access to author, checked out, and title. But if I'm going to navigate over here, and let's say set checked out to private, notice how still we go deep work, and now I only have access to author and title. So yes, of course, I can go over here and say public. Just keep in mind that's the default behavior. Let me just set it up. So I'm going to go with public over here. And also, as a side note, you can combine them. So notice in this case, I have already read only for the title, but I can also say that this is going to be a public one. Now, typically, the way we control some private property is by setting up some kind of method which we can call from the outside. Just to showcase that, let me go with the method, and I'm going to call this checkout. Then let's set up the functionality where I'm going to go with this dot checked out, and I'm going to set it equal to true. So as you can see, I'm still able to access the property from within the class, but like we just saw, we were not able to see the checked out value from outside. So in this case, I can go with deep work, then let me call the method checkout. And now if we'll take a look at the deep work again in the console, the checked out should be set equal to true, correct? So let's navigate back over here and notice, of course, the value right now is true. So this is typically how we would access the value. We set this equal to private, so we cannot access it from the outside, but then we set up a method which actually controls this value. And just to hammer home that we can mix and match, I'll set up a few more methods. One is going to be is checked out, where we're just going to check the value. And then I'm going to set up the private method. So again, this is a bit of an overkill, but I'm just going to add this public one over here. As you can see, that's the default behavior. Everything is public. Then we're going to go with another one where we're just going to check what is the value. So we don't need to take a look at the console. So in here, I simply want to return this dot and checked out. And then also I want to set up the private one where we're going to toggle. So this will be a private method toggle, and let's come up with a name. Status. That sounds like a good one. Hopefully I have no spelling errors. And from this function, I simply want to return the opposite value. So I'm going to go with this dot, and we're looking for checked out. Now, since this is a private one, again, I'm not going to be able to call it here where I have my instance. Instead, where I have the checkout one, I'll just set it equal to this dot. So now I'm accessing the private method and I'm invoking the toggle checked out status like so. And now let's just navigate over here. I guess let's clean up our code a little bit and let's just invoke a few functions. So for starters, let me go with deep work. We have checkout. That's the one that we want to invoke. And after that, we're going to go with log. And again, we're looking for our instance. And now we want to check the actual status. And notice over here, this is set equal to true. So by default, it was set to false. Then I ran the checkout method, which essentially just toggles the value. And then I logged in the console that it's equal to true. Now let me try this one out. Let me run it 2 times. And now this should be set equal to false because we're just toggling back and forth. So this is how we can use public, private, and read-only modifiers in classes when we work with TypeScript. And up next, let's see an awesome shortcut we can use, which is going to save us quite a few lines of code. Now, for starters, I do want to clean this up since I want to discuss getters and setters in the upcoming videos, and I think it's going to be too much logic inside of one class. And also let me remove the first 2 properties as well as all of this code over here in the constructor. So the shortcut is following. At the moment, notice if I go with my deep work and type dot, I don't see anything, correct? Since we didn't set the properties correctly. But what we can also do is add read-only, public, or private modifier in front of the parameters. And if we do that, it will be automatically set as a property with the value inside of the instance. So let me show you what I'm talking about. We go here with read-only. And yes, even though it might seem redundant since by default, technically this is public, if we go here and set up the public, this will be set in my instance. Now, we're not going to use this value, but just to showcase that the same is going to work with the private, I'm simply going to go over here and say some value, and let me set it equal to a number. So now if I go to my deep work right now and type dot, notice I immediately have access to author and the title. So this is the shortcut. We don't need to use this anymore over here. We don't need to explicitly set these properties in a class. We simply can use either read-only or public or private. And effectively, immediately, TypeScript behind the scenes is going to set those properties with the appropriate values when we create the instance. Now, since you might not believe me about the sum value, let's come up with some random function. Let's just explicitly say that this is going to be public, and I'm going to call this get some value. Okay, and then we'll return this dot and some value. So notice inside of the class, I do have access to it. So let me call get some value, and we do want to place it in the console log, I guess. So get some value. Let's invoke this. Let's set up our log. Let's move this inside. And the moment it says undefined, because I did not provide the value. Okay, so notice, of course, it's missing. So I have some value, and since I'm looking for a number, I'm going to go with 45. So once we log right now, everything is correct. So again, this is an awesome shortcut we can use in the constructor. We can add one of the modifiers, and this will automatically set those properties in our instance. And up next, let's work on the example with getters and setters, which are special methods that are accessed like properties. More specifically, let's take a look how we can combine them with the private and public modifiers, which we covered in the previous videos. So one cool thing that we can do with the getter is to set up a computed property. So essentially, I can create the property on the fly. Now, in order to create the getter or the setter, we want to go with get or set keyword. Then we want to come up with a name. So this essentially will be a property on this deep work. And in here, I just want to compute some value. So in this case, I'm going to go with the template string. First, I'll access the title and I'll combine it with the author. This dot author. Let's save it. And now we want to go with our deep work. And notice we have essentially this info property. Now, since we're returning the value, I keep forgetting that we want to place this inside of the log. And in console now we have title followed by the author. Again, what's super cool is that we can create this on the fly. So I can just come up with the property, then do my computation, and I didn't need to set anything in the constructor or above the constructor. And the same way we can set up the setter. The keyword we're looking for is set. And in this case, again, I'm going to control that checked out property. So first, let me start with a setter name. Now, just like good old method, we can provide over here parameters. And in this case, I'm going to call my parameter checked out. Now we do need to provide a type. And then inside of the setter, we're going to go with checked out. And we'll set it equal to our parameter value. And then let's navigate to the console log. And right after that, let's invoke our setter. So we're going to go with our instance, then the setter name. And in this case, again, this is the property. So we set the value. Now, if I'll try to go with hello, and notice how TypeScript immediately complains. So let me go back and yep, I want to go with true. And now I don't see anything in the console since I'm not logging. Let me try one more time where I'm going to go deep work. And if everything's correct, the checked out should be equal to true. And we can use the private and public. As you can see, again, by default, everything is already public. But let me just showcase. If we go here with private, now we can only invoke this inside of the class. So this is not going to work. Let me comment this one out and let me set up 2 more getters. One is going to be for the checked out value. And in the second one, we'll actually use the check out method. A lot of checkouts. So let's go over here with get. Now, as you can see, the name can be exactly the same because one is a setter and other one is a getter. By default, it's going to be public. And then from this one, we want to return checked out. And now just for kicks, let's set up a getter, but inside of it, let's invoke the setter just to make it more confusing. So let's go here with public, even though, again, technically it doesn't change anything in this case. I'm going to go with some info. We're not going to pass anything in. And in order to access our setter, our private one, we want to go with this dot checkout, set it equal to true. And then after that, we want to return. And since I want to return the same value, you know what, let me copy from the info and let me just overwrite in here. So now let's navigate to a console. First, we want to go with log, I guess. We're going to go with deep work, then some info. So this is going to set our checkout equal to true and also return this value. And also let's copy and paste and set up one more. And in this case, I'm looking for my getter, the checkout one. And once I navigate to a console, as you can see, at this point it's false. Then I get back the same info, the title followed by the author. And at the very end, we can see the checked out value, which is now equal to true. And that's how we can use getters and setters with public and private modifiers. And up next, let me showcase how we can implement the interface by the class. And if you remember the video types versus interfaces, it was one of the things which we could do with the interface, but we cannot do with the type. So let's imagine we have the interface and the name is iPerson, which essentially stands for interface person because there will be a class of person. Let's come up with some random properties. So we're looking for string. Then also we want to set up the age number. And you know what? Let's go with greet method. And it's not going to return anything. And it's also not going to take any parameters. Then we're going to go with class. Let's come up with a name. In my case, person. And we go with this implement, which essentially is promising that it will provide all of the properties and methods defined in the interface. So in this case, we're looking for iPerson. That's the interface I want to use. And in here, let's go with the shortcut, which we covered before. So I can go with public. Now, what is the name? It's a string, correct? So let's set up. And also we want to go here with public age. Now this will be a number. We're not going to set up anything in a constructor. Well, we don't have to. We still have a red squiggly line because there is no method. So right after constructor, let's go with greet. It's our function. And let's just log some stuff over here. In this case, we'll go with hello. My name is Slim Shady. And this is name. And also I am this.age. Let me access this.age. And we're going to go with years old. Now we do want to set up our instance. So let's go with const and hipster. We're looking for a new person. Let's provide a name, shake, and bake. And as far as the years, well, let's go with 100. And then at the very end, let's invoke hipster greet. And if everything is correct, we should see the text in the console. So that's how we can implement the interface with the class. Again, something we cannot do with the good old type alias.